What's up, friends, and welcome to another edition, a live edition of Syracuse Sports. You got Brent and Chris, you got Chris Carlson, two people that have seen Star Wars. It's been an interesting discussion of who has seen these movies and who has not, based off of Kyle McCord's non-viewing of the Star Wars movies, as we learned in the All Access show last night. And we've got plenty to get into here after, Chris, the second to last training camp practice that we'll get to see. Yes. After a while, the Allen Iverson clip comes to life. We are talking about practice. I would like to see this football team play another football team. I have some thoughts about how good I think they're going to be against other football teams, and I'd like to get into those thoughts. We're getting over that finish line. A couple more practices this week. Our last practice that we'll get to see and talk to players and coaches will be Friday, and then it's game week, baby. We're getting there, man. We are 11 days away from the start of the Syracuse football season against Ohio. Game week approaches, but a couple of practice notes that we saw today to discuss. First, Marvin Harrison Jr. had some interesting comments about Syracuse, though I think we should focus on something else he said. I'll put it that way. In that fun podcast he had with Zaire Franklin, the former Orangeman. We heard from Nick Williams today, defensive edge coach for the Orange and ace recruiter for Syracuse. And we are going to answer some questions from our Syracuse Sports Insiders who have texted some great stuff to us throughout training camp. And what a great time to be a Syracuse Sports Insider. All you have to do is text the word orange to 315-847-3895 to sign up if you haven't already. You get to try it free for 2 weeks, and then it's just $3.99 a month after that. And folks, this is not a group text. You text me, I text you. You text me anytime about what you want us to ask the players and coaches, what we're seeing at practice. Football is prominent now, but basketball is just around the corner. We give you the latest that we have discovered. If we have breaking news, you get it first as a Syracuse Sports Insider, and we love hearing your thoughts, opinions. And you have helped us break news, by the way, with your terrific tips and insight as well. So we'll get to some of your great questions coming up as well. Chris, today, I'm just gonna lead with this here. It might not be the lead, but it's the lead on my mind. In team periods that we got to witness today, I saw Will Nixon out there as the second running back behind LaQuinn Allen, meaning that our guy, Yasin Willis, was on the third team. Perhaps a blip on the radar screen. I hope a blip on the radar screen, given how much I've hyped up Willis. But it just showed that Nixon can play and that he's got a little more experience and that, you know, they've got some depth in that running back room. So I guess that's the good news with my guy getting knocked down to the third team, albeit temporarily, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was right. The drill seemed to be largely passing focused from what I saw. From what I recall, it seemed like there were a lot of passing plays. I do think, right, that's where the older players generally have the edge, right? Catching passes out of the backfield, pass protecting. Older guys usually do that better than younger guys. It also perhaps speaks to the truth of what Fran says, that if guys are close, they're going to keep competing every day, and they're going to keep sort of readjusting the pecking order every day. We've heard that 3 or 4 running backs are going to play, so if that's the case, they both got to get reps with the first team, because you're not switching everybody out. So yeah, I'm not giving up on Yasin Willis, running back 1B yet.
I am not either. I will never give up on this quest. But Fran even said it on All Access, the 1-2 punch he's going to provide with the Quinn. Other reps we've seen in practice where he has been with the twos, like that kid's getting on the field. But it does show you there's depth in that room. LaQuinn is going to get the bulk of the carries as he should, as a team leader and as somebody who's, 1,000 yards last year. And Fran has flat out said he wants and needs 1,500 yards out of him this year. So that's going to be the guy who's getting 65, 70% of the carries. But you're going to see both Nixon and Yasin on the field. We saw, and again, this was just today, but it is noteworthy that Zeed Haynes was running with the ones out there today. He had Umari Hatcher on the other side. Of course, OG out there with Dan Villari as well. So we've talked about the depth at wide receiver. Zeed brings speed and Hatcher brings experience. And so Jackson Meeks brings a little bit of everything, right? Darryl Gill Jr. is a name that you have to continue to include in this conversation. And it was Meeks and Gill that were the second team guys lined up on the outside, right? So Zeed has come in and done exactly what they expected him to. We've talked about him a lot, the buzz and the speed that he's bringing there. So we could go to practice on Friday, and it could be Meeks with the ones and Zeed with the twos, but it just goes to show you that a solid rotation of 4 or 5 guys is emerging. And noteworthy today, Chris, that Justice Ross Simmons, the transfer from Colorado State, a kid from Rochester, was once again on the bikes, meaning you're basically out of practice, but they want you to be active and work on some things. He's got a hamstring injury, which you want to be careful with. You don't want to force it. And with 11 days to go here before they really get at it here, they want to be sure with him. So I would look for him to try to work his way back into the rotation as the season progresses. But he's lost some reps being out of time there. So we saw those 4 guys that we mentioned kind of take hold, at least on the outside.
Yeah, Justin is sort of, he's on the bike, and then some days he sort of stretches alongside the team before he returns to the bike. I think that's sort of what we saw yesterday, where we didn't sort of see him on the bike because he was stretching with the team, but we didn't see live yesterday, so we don't know necessarily how much he really did. It was just a short viewing period for us. So, yeah, still limited, and again, like training camp is sort of coming to an end. He dealt with an injury in the spring too at Colorado State. So he is a guy who is, he's really been battling injuries and really struggled to get reps on the field for the last 9 months. So just something to be aware of if he doesn't light the world on fire right away, or we're not seeing him on the field right away. He has lost a lot of time.
Has lost some reps, but, there are options at that position. So those 4 that we mentioned at the wide receiver position coming into focus a little bit. The offensive line has been pretty much the same. I think that line is locked in. It's the names we've been telling you about. Savion Washington, Mark Petrie, Jean-Ray Reed, Jacob Bradford, and Darius Weatherspoon. So I'd be very surprised. We'll talk to Dale Williams on Friday. I sometimes coaches, we talked to Nick Williams today, and we asked him kind of how his depth was looking on the defensive line. God bless him. He gave the ultimate coach speak answer. He's like, we're all one unit. There's no ones. There's no twos. It's like, yeah, there is. There's ones and twos, right? We kind of know that. Of course, Fidel Diggs. And
he's not a 4. Fidel Diggs is not a 4.
He's not
I guarantee you that. He is not a 4.
Right. And Dennis Jacquez Jr. and Deion Wilson Jr., who you talked to again today, the tank, right? We kind of know some of those guys that at the very least are going to be out there first. Other guys will rotate in for sure, but I love the all for one for all mentality for coaches, but coaches still hesitant to give out those depth charts to other teams out there, particularly Ohio with the wandering eyes they have right now. But that offensive line seems pretty set. Defense, I didn't see any major changes. I know Emily was keeping an eye out here. We're going to try and project the depth chart on Friday's pod, who the second 2 safeties will be, but we kind of know who the corners are. So, look, we only get to see a part of practice. They could completely flip the script when we're not there, but
unlikely.
Unlikely.
And I don't know that you'd want to mess with. Yeah. I don't know that you'd want to mess with your own team that much. Just
okay. They're gone, guys. The real team's out there now.
Yeah,
right?
Like,
exactly.
well, you wouldn't spend 10 minutes, really trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. I don't really. Fran's trying to have a good practice, not worrying about cloaks and daggers, I don't think.
Now, today, Michael Johnson Jr. ran with the twos. It feels like they've been trying to use the word that will be on the depth chart when it comes out next week. There's going to be an or at that quarterback position. They're going to say Michael Johnson Jr. or Carlos Del Rio Wilson. I don't know. I'm not reporting that. That's my strong indication of what they're going to do at that position. But at least today, Michael Johnson Jr. was getting some reps with the two. So we saw a little team period today. We should note they were not in pads for the second straight day, just kind of those shells as they call them. So Fran, after emphasizing they're going to be a physical team, they're going to hit in practice. They have. The players have talked a number of times about the training they've undergone, the weight they've put on, what the training staff has done, what they've done in the weight room. There have been some very physical practices that we've witnessed and that we've heard about. But Fran, I think, has been smart to be like, okay, calm before the storm. We're going to take a breath here. They had a hard-fought scrimmage on Saturday. Let's not get anybody else hurt. You know, we know Braylon Ingram is out, and we learned Marcus Washington Jr. is now out for the season with a bicep injury. He was back over on the bikes today. Knock on wood, they haven't had any other serious injuries. I mentioned Justice Ross Simmons is working his way back. So Fran, at this point, knows that, you know, they're coming to the end of camp, and it's let's just get through this and really go into game week as healthy as they can. So that's what we saw today. We'll have one last practice on Friday, one last chance to catch up with the players. We'll talk to them again during game week, but kind of one last free-for-all at camp before they kick it into game week mode. Chris, one thing I wanted to ask you about was to change gears a little bit and focus on Kyle McCord here, QB1. You talked to him yesterday, and we've talked certainly about Kyle and the role he's going to play with this team, but it's interesting how he's integrating himself into Syracuse, which is a big life change. It's a big attention change, as much attention as there is on him at Syracuse. When you come from Ohio State and the fishbowl that you are in there and the circumstances in which he left Ohio State, that's going to continue to be a discussion, and people that are keeping an eye on him. Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm going to get to these comments coming up here shortly, had some things to say about him. But I just wonder what your takeaway was from spending a little one-on-one time with Kyle and just kind of how all that's developing here in this transfer portal era where somebody comes in, transfers in, and takes over as QB1, feels like he's been here for a couple of years, when in reality he's only been here for about 6 or 7 months.
Yeah, I sort of warned everybody this was going to happen, that the longer like training camp goes, and like the more I listen to like Syracuse players talking about their optimism, the more like I'm going to like just gobble up all the Kool-Aid. Just like chug, just start chugging it. Just give me that orange Kool-Aid. And I felt that way after talking to Kyle yesterday, because, you know, he said it's such a difficult spot because, right, like he had a very tough departure from Ohio State, but it doesn't, and right, almost unfair, right? You go 11-1 as a, or not 11-1, but you lose one game, right, to the national champions by a play, and you get sort of discarded or run out of town, and like you have to feel that's unfair, right? Like any normal human being would be like, man, like what do you guys want from me? Like what more can I do? And he didn't say it, but like there's a very like the way he mentioned it was sort of, you know, you win by 30 points and the fan base there wants to win by 40. And I think he's going to really relish playing here, where like if he wins games, like that's going to be enough. Like, you know, if he wins enough games, don't worry about buying dinner in Syracuse ever again. Like
Exactly.
lifetime pass, right? Like we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for a good quarterback, and I think he's really feeling good that he can be that type of guy here.
You got to look at it too from his perspective. There's got to be some motivation there, and I'm going to read the quote here from Marvin Harrison Jr. in a second here, but now you look at it in Ohio State, and look, he can go out there and go 12-0 and beat Michigan for all I know this year, right? But when you look over, like, you brought in a transfer from Kansas State, who's now the starting quarterback there. It'd be one thing if it was like some super hyped up #1 recruit in the country, or another transfer like a Caleb Williams type that wanted to spend another year somewhere, goes to Ohio State, like somebody that just really you look at it and say, Kyle, as good as you are, like, we got to play this guy. Didn't feel that way. It did feel like he was the scapegoat for a lot of things that happened. And what happened? Here's what Marvin Harrison Jr. said about it, right? He was a top 10 draft pick, now with the Arizona Cardinals. And he said, quote, now this was on Zaire Franklin's podcast, and there's a couple other things that Marvin said. They got a little attention that we wrote about it at syracuse.com, but this was the one that really grabbed me, Chris. And he said this, quote, this is Marvin Harrison Jr. I think Kyle's a great quarterback. I really do. What happened last year, if you really look at it, we're a play away from beating a national championship team. The situation didn't really work out in his favor, and we brought in some transfers from Kansas State and a freshman from Alabama, referring to the quarterbacks. He wanted to do what was in his best interest for himself, go to Syracuse and start over. I expect great things, honestly. right? And there was that one clip that was on the New York Giants version, the offseason version, if you will, of Hard Knocks when they're at the combine and there was a wide receivers coach that is basically dumping on a throw that Kyle McCord had that Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't come up with, right? But I'm just real. Kyle has been very, he goes to the Tom Brady school of media, right? And I know that's ironic now because Tom Brady's in the media and is going to give, stronger opinions from the booth and Fox. But when Tom was a quarterback, everything was pretty straight and forward, pretty vanilla, didn't rock the boat, kind of told you what you wanted to hear. I think Kyle had some funny moments on ACCL Access. You see a little bit of his personality shine through. But I was kind of struck when he was at media the other day and he's like, okay, do I have anything else? And they were like, no, you're good. He's like, all right, I'm done, right? Like it's not the part of the job he relishes, right? But he understands the role he plays as a leader and a quarterback. But man, as a competitor, he's got to have that burn and fire here. So he has Zede Haynes and he has Jackson Meeks and he has OG and he has these receivers he's connected with. Every story we've heard from, they're saying all the right things from the players, the coaches, everybody we've talked to about the extra time he's putting in, the leadership he has showed. When we ask who are the offensive players that are giving the defense headaches, right? Kyle McCord is the first name out of most people's mouths, along with Zede Haynes, right? So that's why I'm kind of sick at camp, Chris. Like, we've heard and seen so much. You do have that glass of Kool-Aid next to you, and look, in camp, we've been spoiled. I don't think I've seen him miss a throw. There's been some drops, but the throws are pinpoint. He looks the part, right? They've said, Ross Douglas said yesterday, the wide receivers coach, that Kyle has more mobility than people give him credit for. He's not going to be running the triple option, as he said, but he's healthy and he can escape play. So it's like, man, I got to see it now. And I got to see it at Syracuse. I watched the film at Ohio State. I saw everything. But, Chris, that's the margin of error at Ohio State. And sometimes I look at it, I'm like, man, I'm kind of bummed that Syracuse doesn't have this year in, year out Ohio State, Michigan, Auburn, Alabama type rivalry, right?
Oh, it's probably not healthy. Like as a human being, it is.
But that's the other side of it, right? The other side of it is Kyle McCord comes one play away from beating the team up north, as they say in Ohio. And that's his legacy there. Like, that's it. It's so cutthroat and so cut and dry. You didn't beat Michigan and we're done with you, right? And I don't know if I could, even as a fan, be that obsessed with one thing. I couldn't do it. So I give him credit for coming out of that pressure cooker and getting a second chance here at Syracuse to show his stuff.
And he did say, right, he said nothing about Ohio State. He's like, hey, I saw college football sort of at its peak. I'll always have that. I'll always remember that. I'll always appreciate that. I'm happy in Syracuse now where I go out and people talk to me about other things, right? They try to suggest restaurants to me. They try to ask me where I've been. He was really appreciative about, Syracuse people treating him like a human being rather than a football tossing robot, which admittedly he does appear sometimes because he does come from that Brady school. he does come out of the quarterback lab in terms of how he carries himself. But he was really complimentary about our area and how we've treated him since he's gotten here.
The quarterback lineage at Syracuse is always fascinating to talk about, too, because it's not a position historically that Syracuse has dominated, right? I mean, you have Don McPherson, and you have Donovan McNabb, and you have Marvin Graves, and you have Todd Philcox, God love him, spent 10 years in the National Football League, right? Mm-hmm. And you have individual players that have had individual good seasons here. But look at this run in the last decade, Chris. You've had Ryan Nassib, who by all means was a great quarterback, great pro-style quarterback. The 2012 season, some projected him to be a first-round pick in the NFL. He didn't go to the fourth round, and then he sat behind Eli Manning, who had the longest start streak in NFL history and just wasn't going to bump Eli Manning out of the way, but still was in the NFL for a few years, made some NFL paychecks, now works in finance and is doing well, right? But by all means, checked every box. You had Eric Dungy, who passed the torch to Tommy DeVito, and while Tommy DeVito had mixed results here before having to transfer to Illinois, came in as a 4-star, high-rated, within that 6-hour window, New Jersey prospect, right? Like, that felt like what you had to do, that box you had to check. Into the era of transfers. Garrett Schrader transfers in, competes, beats out DeVito, had some injury issues, right? But the way he beat Wake Forest last year and the way he went out, You look at the numbers, he's in some top 5 categories, even in a short period of time. When he was here at Syracuse, people appreciated how he played the game. Like, you're going to look back fondly on Garrett Schrader, right? So there's a mix there of traditional recruits, transfers, some guys that maybe didn't live up to the hype. And in comes Kyle McCord, where the clock is ticking as a transfer who you know is only here for a certain period of time. But Chris, you said it. If you win here and you are part of what will be viewed as a transformation of Syracuse football, you'll never buy another drink in this town again, right? The people are so hungry to see it. And I think people view McCord, and I don't want to put too much pressure on the kid, but it just comes with the territory at the position he's in.
He's not. It won't bother him after Ohio State. Whatever we can do, he's not going to feel it.
That's it. That's the beauty of this. And that's no offense to the passionate Syracuse fans out there, but you guys can't touch Ohio State. And just the rabid fan base that they are. This is all, I don't want to undercut it here, but compared to that, this has got to be, let's just say, an easier stroll in the park.
This is what I was talking about with like me drinking the Kool-Aid, right? Like Fran is talking about, I want Little League Kyle, I want free and easy and running Kyle, and like what better place for him to get it after getting out of that pressure cooker and coming here. Yes, any starting college quarterback feels pressure, but like he is going to feel so unburdened by playing here that I'm just talking myself into it, that he's going to be gunslinging and we're going to have a blast. That's what I'm talking about, drinking the Kool-Aid. Like I'm convincing myself that this is like what's going to happen.
Now there's a lot on him. There's a lot on him staying healthy. We've talked about the shaky nature, I'll put it, of the backup quarterback position. And I mentioned Ryan Nassib. He's the last guy that's gone start to finish that didn't have to be replaced either by performance or by injury. And that was over a decade ago. So just a reminder about how big it was that Syracuse got McCord, where he's coming from, and everything just in a short period of time. I'm just fascinated by the transfer portal era. You bring in all these new people, and it's like you got to get it going as quickly as you can. Time is not on your side. So what do you do to accelerate that process and get everybody on the same page there? So Marvin Harrison Jr., we mentioned the McCord comments. He was on Zaire Franklin's podcast, which was interesting because they're all in their uniforms. I think there was like a joint practice.
Yep.
So the Colts and the Cardinals have a joint practice, and then they just sit in front of the mics still in their pads, and they do a podcast. So I would encourage you to go check it out. I wanted to play a clip here on the show. Beforehand, I had some technical problems. I couldn't get the audio downloaded, but I would encourage you to watch it. Context is everything. Sometimes what you read in print doesn't necessarily translate to how they're saying it. So this was said in a very cordial manner. Everybody's laughing about it, right? It's kind of, revisionist history, but Marvin Harrison Jr. is there with Zaire and was asked on the podcast about, was Syracuse ever on the radar? Were they in the top 5 schools? And Marvin Harrison Jr. responded, quote, not a chance that he would have considered Syracuse as a college football program. So then Zaire kind of goes back and forth, and everybody's laughing. And of course, Zaire, he's going to stand up for the Cuse, and he mentioned some wide receivers that had come through here, and then they even actually got into Kion Anthony. Are you listening? Like the legacy, because of course Marvin Harrison Sr. was one of the greatest wide receivers in Syracuse history, the last Syracuse receiver to get picked in the first round, by the way, in 1996, which was part of the reason why Marvin Harrison Jr. kind of jabbed those guys on the podcast and say, well, who are they sending to the league? Why would I go there? And look, hate to say it, guys, that's why we've seen a coaching change here recently. That he made a good point. Like, he wasn't going to come to Syracuse just to continue a legacy. He was on that level and he could pick wherever he wanted to go in the country. And I think it worked out pretty well for him. He was a top 10 pick out of Ohio State, and he's regarded as somebody that could be the rookie of the year in the National Football League this year. I think Caleb Williams is the betting favorite there, but don't count out Harrison. This guy's going to step right in and make an immediate impact here. So, Chris, that's my long-winded way of saying, if you see that quote from Marvin Harrison Jr., Syracuse fans might kind of grit their teeth and get a little salty about that. Just don't. Like, we knew it wasn't going to happen. There's no use crying over spilled milk here. We talk about this with other recruits. Why didn't Brianna Stewart or Mike Hart or Greg Paulus or, fill in the blank of either legacies or not that didn't, for whatever reason, come to Syracuse? You're not going to get them all. And I think it worked out better for everybody in a lot of ways.
I mean, number one, like the clip, right? Everything was in good fun, right?
For sure.
Like Zaire played for LaSalle College in Philly, and Marvin Harrison Jr. his freshman year he played for Zaire's alma mater, but then he transferred to St. Joe's Prep to go play with Kyle, and they're like, it's a huge rival, so like Zaire's giving him crap for transferring to the other school, and so there's a little bit of trash talk there, and like the reality is like right that's what Fran Brown is here to try to like change. The idea that a legacy player would view Syracuse as like a no-go, like from the start, just because of where they are in the pecking order and their history of producing NFL guys. Like, if you've watched the last 20 years of Syracuse football, like, yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, that's what needs to change.
And where I give Marvin Harrison Jr. credit, and what you said about Fran is right on point, Chris. But where I give him credit is I don't think he ever flirted with Syracuse. He didn't put him in the top.
No, he didn't drag it on.
He didn't drag it out.
Fool anybody.
So Kion Anthony, he is free to do whatever he wants to do and go wherever he wants to go. But it does change the conversation a bit when you're visiting Syracuse. Syracuse is in the top 5. You haven't shut it down. Like you have put it in play. That the son of one of the greatest players in the history of Syracuse basketball and one of the great one-and-done players in the history of the sport could come here. It'd be one thing if he's like, no, don't want to do it, want to forge my own legacy and go somewhere else. Syracuse is on the fishing line. So if for some reason he doesn't pick Syracuse, I would kind of understand. And again, I would wish him well wherever he goes and wherever he does. But that's different than Marvin Harrison Jr. is like, nope. Not my top 5, not considering it, not my dad, nothing against Syracuse, but I'm going down my own way here. So I just wanted to read the Kyle McCord quote too. And again, Chris and I both would encourage you, watch the clip. It's in good nature. It's good fun. It's a fun podcast. There's great camaraderie with these guys. It's a lot of fun
Zaire's great
to listen to. And Zaire's awesome. Zaire's great. So, and again, if you know it's on Zaire's show, it's all in good fun. And he does stick up for the Cuse there. For those of you like, oh, he's got to defend Syracuse's honor. He did, right? But
yeah, he mentioned Steve Ishmael. He mentioned Hamlet Atawo. He's like, we got good wide receivers.
We had some guys.
But in Marvin Harrison Jr.'s defense, like, none of those guys got drafted number 4 overall.
And wouldn't he have come in off a 1-10 season? The 1-10 2020 season that Syracuse had? Like, can you blame him for looking elsewhere in that case? But I don't know. That gets people a little stirred up sometimes. So I just wanted to get into that. But I liked what he said about Kyle McCord. He's drinking the Kool-Aid on that. And that's somebody that's played with McCord, has some insight into him, and expects good things here at Syracuse.
And if you remember the All Access show, Kyle just calls him up, and he picks up the phone. Like that's not a guy who's just like, saying the nice thing about his buddy. Like they have a relationship that has persisted through the years.
By the way, they did that, didn't they? Say like, who's the most famous person in your phone?
Yeah.
Kyle McCord went to the Peyton Manning camp. So if he's got Peyton Manning's number in his phone, like nothing against Marvin Harrison Jr., I think that would probably qualify.
Maybe Peyton's stingy with his phone number.
Could be.
Maybe Kyle's just like, yeah, you know what? Like I'm gonna go with the guy who I know will find this amusing rather than not take the risk with Peyton Manning.
See, still a teammate at heart, right? I'm gonna say this is my guy, and he picked right up and answered, and that was a fun moment on the All Access show. We did a review of the second episode of All Access on last night's pod. If you guys missed that, I would go check that out. We had a lot of fun reviewing that episode in which we learned Kyle McCord has not seen Star Wars, which it's okay. Nobody's perfect. We will fix that mistake.
Half your material's gonna not work on him. Like it's just he's gonna.
I gotta be careful with the references. What are you talking about? Exactly. We had some great questions and comments from our Syracuse Sports Insiders, Chris. I wanted to highlight a few of them, starting with Nate, who says, are they keeping the same uniforms this year? Would love to remove the block S from the helmet. I know there is typically some rebranding with new coaches in charge. Just wondering if you've heard. I don't think there's any new uniforms in the mix, alternate uniforms in the mix. Chris, I know you've written about this at times. I've written about this at times. It's a real process to get new uniforms. The design, it takes months. Like they actually have to plan these things almost a year in advance. just soup to nuts, start to finish. That process is just that. It's a process. It's not to say there won't be. I just haven't heard of any. Have you heard any uniform changes? Or I would love to see the McNabb look from the 90s come back, kind of an old school feel, maybe against Pitt one day or like a Virginia Tech in a Big East reunion type of thing. I just haven't heard anything in the works there.
I have also not heard anything. Again, doesn't mean it's not happening. Usually, though, we do hear sort of rumblings and people are like, well, you can't tell anybody, but you're in the right ballpark. And haven't heard anything even to that sort of, that would lead us in that direction. So I wouldn't expect it. And if it happens, we'll all be surprised.
My guy Ed in North Syracuse says, Brent, if Nixon is getting reps ahead of Willis, it's got to be because of Nixon's experience and probably in the blocking, protect the quarterback piece. If there's a bigger fan of Willis than me, it is Ed, who texts about him a lot. That's definitely what it was. We brought it up earlier in the pod. Willis is getting on the field one way or the other, and Nixon's getting on the field, right? So, but I think that's probably a fair thing to point out there. It's a little more experience. And look, you got a couple sons of coaches getting out there, not because they're the sons of coaches. These guys can play. They've played elsewhere. Nixon at Washington and MJ Jr. at a couple different spots. Was a highly regarded quarterback coming out of college. These guys can play a little bit, and they've said they're going to put guys on the field that can play.
I think in both cases, right? I think their fathers gave them very honest appraisals of what the playing time situation would be here. Like, it's not like they're elevated to starters. It's not like they're coming into starters. But I'm sure their dad said, yes, you are good enough that, like, you're going to see the field here, and, that matters to us.
In both positions of need. Syracuse needed another quarterback. While Malachi James has opened some eyes with his speed, there's just a lot of, to steal a phrase from a great movie, a lot of youths in the running back room. They needed somebody with just some playing experience, and they happen to know a guy, right? You start in your circle. Like, I know a kid that can come in and play, right? I didn't have the name on this. Apologies to our Syracuse Sports Insider who sent in this question that I can't give you a shout out here, but it said, Brent, after the spring game and Fran's comments, I'd be interested in what he wants the pregame walk to be. Does he envision a team entering the field, kind of starting a tradition with a song? Now, it's interesting because Fran did bring that up the other day. He didn't say what, but he did say there is some music they have in mind that they want to enter the field with. He does want the quad walk to become a thing.
Yeah, he wants that to be a thing.
They tried it in spring, didn't really go the way he wanted it to. He wanted the band there, and look, spring practice, the spring game is it's a walkthrough in a lot of ways. So maybe they learned a little bit from that. There's 4 home games to start the year. It's going to take a while to build new traditions, to let people know this is what he wants to do. But Fran has noted he does want to have that kind of quad walk. And they kind of walk in past the Ernie Davis statue and on through, and they're going to try and establish that. So to answer your question, the answer is yes. I'll be curious about music and pregame traditions. And I've heard a lot, Chris, about Syracuse really wants people to have the app handy, and they want to try and kind of do like a light show, kind of a modern thing. They tried that a little bit last year. But, I brought up the lack of a true rival. One thing that, and it's not for lack of effort. They have tried some things, right? The train horn, and they run in at the beginning and
smoke a little bit.
Not
quite Miami, but a little bit of smoke.
Right. But Syracuse doesn't have like a Clemson running down the hill or Virginia Tech, playing Metallica. Like, they just, for whatever reason, that has slipped through the cracks through the years, and they don't have that, man, you have got to be there at the beginning of the game for this. And it does look like Fran is trying to start something a little bit. So appreciate the effort.
It is hard. Like, it's hard. I just think those things are harder than we think it is. Like when you force it, you feel you people feel that it's forced, and there's so many different demographics that they're trying to like keep happy, right? You've got your students that don't like the same music as us townies who don't like the same music as the players, right? So like, how do you get something that works for all three? I just think it happens naturally, or it just doesn't happen. It's harder than like we we're all just like, well, why can't they do it? And I do think it is harder than we think.
It's hard. You want it to be organic too. You hit the nail on the head there. It's like, hey guys, today we're starting traditions are born. They come from lore, and maybe, back in the day somebody started something and they've been doing it. So they've been doing that since the 1920s. Like, somebody's got to have the idea.
And they come from winning.
That's the other thing.
Like when it's winning, it's like, oh, remember that cool thing we did when we won the game? Yeah, let's do that again.
Born out of that. That was Rob, by the way, who had that question. Shout out to Rob on that. One more here, Chris, from Mikey P, who says, is Big Spoon the lock to be protecting McCord's blind side, as has been alluded to previously? I think so. I mean, Washington has spent some time at left tackle. Nick Williams brought him up today as somebody who is, he said, have you seen how big this? Oh, here, I've got the clip right here. This is Syracuse edge coach Nick Williams.
Well, have you seen Savion Washington? Have you seen him? He's huge. So it was a premium that we went and got big guys, big D linemen that can hold a point and strike blockers. But Coach Dale does a great job with his O-line. So it was important that we got big in the trenches. I think we checked that box. They play hard, and we look good. We look good.
Well, you always have to keep a little window open that things can change, Chris. Like, that offensive line has been pretty consistent, and it does look like Big Spoon is going to be protecting Kyle's blind side.
Yeah, again, unless they're trying to pull a big surprise and pull the wool over our eyes, this has been like 5 or 6 practices now where we've seen the first string with, Weatherspoon on the left and Savion on the right.
Man, I have walked into practice it happened again today. He was walking out and I was walking in. Savion Washington, per Nick's comments, like, man, that dude is huge. Like, these are football players. They're all big in one sense, but that guy, he is hard to miss. It's going to be, I would love to just be sitting on campus and watch him walk through campus and have people just gawk at him like, my God, look at that. He is a large man, right? So that's who you want on the offensive line, blindside or not. That shows the size that has been added, the depth that has been added on the offensive line. And it's as simple as this, Chris, and I'll kind of close with this on this note. People have been asking me, certainly here on the show and Syracuse Sports Insiders, but just, in the produce section at Wegmans and just out getting ice cream, and just friends of mine, like, hey, how they looking? And I'm like, they look like a football team. They look like a football team. That's the best compliment I can give them, because frankly, in past years, I'd be like, they kind of look like a football team here, there, but a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Everywhere you look, particularly at that position, they look like a football team.
Yeah, they're going to, right? I know it rubbed people the wrong way sometimes when Dino Babers would talk in awe of how Clemson looked or Florida State looked before the game. But that was true. There was just a huge size differential in a lot of games. And that is certainly a lot less likely to happen, and it's going to be a lot less obvious. If Syracuse is outsized, it's at least going to be in the ballpark, with a Fred Brown team.
All right, Chris, deep breath. We got one more left. There's a couple more practices overall, but for us and watching practice and getting to talk to players, Friday's it, and then we're locked into game week, and it'll be time to talk about some real football as Syracuse gets ready for Ohio. So we will be back on Friday with another pod. We're going to project the depth chart. I would plug a couple of things. One is our friend Emily Liker's got some good things coming later this week that I would keep an eye on, syracuse.com.
Be up early in the morning.
Be up early.
In a couple days, maybe.
It's one day this week that's not today or tomorrow. I would be up early and have syracuse.com ready to go, get a nice strong cup of coffee and get up early and check that out. We're going to project the depth chart later on this week on the pod. Chris is working on a couple of things you're going to want to check out. Emily's got a new Syracuse football newsletter that comes out Monday mornings. You can sign up for that at syracuse.com/newsletters. My newsletter, Syracuse Orange Sports, comes out on Thursday mornings. So check that out. And, of course, everything going on with our Syracuse Sports Insiders. Keep sending us your questions, your comments, your opinions, all the great questions that we highlighted tonight. Like, just what's on your mind when it comes to Syracuse sports? What do you want us to check out? What are you thinking? You have given us tips to chase down. That's the beauty of being a Syracuse Sports Insider, the back and forth communication and all the stuff you guys get first, some of which you get exclusively, the direct connection that you get to us. 315-847-3895. That's the Syracuse Sports Insider text line. Text the word orange to that number. If you haven't already, that'll sign you up 2 weeks free to become a Syracuse Sports Insider. And that's just $3.99 a month after that. And with the season coming, we're only going to be ramping things up, and you are going to want to be on board. That's it for this edition of Syracuse Sports. Chris, we thank you as always. We thank our Syracuse Sports Insiders. We thank you guys for checking out the show. We'll be back on Friday for one last training camp show. Until then, you guys have a great rest of your week.